Elon, welcome to Israel.
Well,
Uh, you've been here before.
yes.
This is a visit unlike anyone because you started it out in the communities right next to Gaza, where the horrendous massacre took place. Uh, we went there together,
Yeah.
and then I showed you a short film of some of the horrors, and I wonder if you can give you some of your impressions of what you saw.
It was jarring to see the scene of the massacre, or one of the scenes of the massacres, as well as to see the short film afterwards that showed more of innocent people getting killed. It was troubling in that movie, especially to see the joy experienced by the people that were killing innocent civilians, including kids and babies and defenseless people, essentially. So, um, it's one thing if obviously if civilians die accidentally, but if it's another thing to revel in the joy of killing civilians. That's not, that's frankly that's evil.
It's really a manifestation of a death cult. That's what Hamas is. It's a death cult, and they glorify and gore. I mean, some of the things that we saw are children being murdered in front of their parents, parents being murdered in front of their children, mothers who hid their little boys in a laundromat, in an oven, uh, or in a hidden attic. And these monsters found the attic, and you can imagine what these people felt. These little boys felt like in a grim fairy tale. The monster is coming at you, and they killed them and burned them. They beheaded women. They beheaded men. They tied a woman next to a tree uh, and raped her repeatedly, and then murdered her. They shot at people in a nature festival, music festival.
Yeah.
Killed hundreds. You saw the pictures there.
Yeah.
It's just horrible. I mean, just killed people, uh, women.
Yes.
Uh,
I mean, the rebuttal is often made that, well, but Israel has killed civilians, also in Gaza. But there is an important difference here, which is that Israel tries to avoid killing civilians, doing everything it can to avoid killing civilians, and there's not sort of joy expressed in killing
well,
civilians.
it's regret. First of all, every civilian
Yes.
casualty is a tragedy, and we try to minimize them. But what is happening here is that Hamas is essentially committing a double war crime. The first war crime is to deliberately target civilians,
Mm-hmm.
and not only target them, but mutilate them, rape them, behead them, burn them. The second war crime is to deliberately hide behind civilians, which is
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing in Gaza. So they're not an army in bases or out in field maneuvers. They're implanting themselves in residential areas, in schools, and hospitals. The hospitals are their command centers. We found tunnels there
Yeah.
with the military equipment, with guns, with ammo. Uh, so, what do you do against an enemy of this kind? Well, the one thing you cannot do is give immunity to the terrorists because they're hiding among civilians. Because if you give them immunity, everybody says they shouldn't be doing this. But effectively, nobody's willing to take the action to make sure that this is not an effective tactic. Because if it is, it'll repeat itself again
Yes.
and again and again. By the way, Hamas says we're going to do it again and again. But it's not only against Israel that they'll do it. This will spread very quickly throughout the Middle East, imperil the entire region. From there, they'll go to Europe, and from there, they'll also go elsewhere to America, whom they call the Great Satan. We're just the little Satan in their
Yes.
view.
America's
So
the great Satan.
America is the Great Satan, and this is an Iranian axis.
Yes.
Remember,
Yes. Yes.
it's
Thank you.
Iran, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas.
Yes.
It's all part of that same axis that goes against Israel, the United States, free civilization, and the moderate Arab states. We're all on one side; they're on the other side. So, how do you fight it? Well, let's see. The people who are protesting what Israel is doing do not take into account the fact that Israel asked, we called on the Palestinian population to leave the zone of fighting. Okay, they wanted to leave. Guess who stopped them at
Sure.
gunpoint? Hamas. Okay, we broke that and created a cordon, a safe corridor that they could leave to the southern part of the Gaza Strip, where no fighting was taking place.
Yes.
And guess who fired on the safe corridor? Hamas. So it's not Israel that's preventing the civilians from leaving the war zone. It's Hamas. It's not Israel that is shooting at civilians who want to escape. It's Hamas. But we shouldn't give them the ability to escape responsibility, which is what all these demonstrations are happening. The example I'll give: Hitler does these horrible crimes. He perpetrates the Holocaust.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
the Allies strike back. They invade Normandy. The Germans hold themselves up in German cities. Nobody said, well, don't attack the Wehrmacht, the German army, the Nazi army, because you have civilians there. In fact, that's exactly what the Allies did through the cities of France and the cities of Germany, and many, many, many civilians were killed. I don't know what history would be like if you had, the kind of mass communications that we have today, and protests would have been launched against the Allies on behalf
Yeah.
of the
Probably.
Nazis, because as the German chancellor who visited Israel and saw these horrors, he said, "Hamas are the new Nazis. Hamas are the new Nazis," and people are demonstrating either out of ignorance or out of malevolence. They're protesting
Yeah.
for the wrong side.
I mean, it was troubling to see massive protests in almost every major city um, in favor of Hamas, or well, they generally characterize it as sort of a free Palestine movement. Um, and I think one can generally agree that we want a good future for Palestinians, um, and we want to you know I mean the challenge is really how do you get rid of the ones who are hell bent on murdering Jewish people, um, while minimizing civilian casualties, and then ultimately stopping the sort of propaganda that is
Yeah.
convincing people to engage in um, murder. So that at the end of the day, that's really essential is to figure out, okay, how are they being trained to have these to believe that murdering and having joy at the death of civilians is a good thing, and to stop that training.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, because we have first a mission to destroy Hamas. Nothing's going to stop that, because if you want peace, destroy Hamas. If you want security, destroy Hamas. If you want a better life for the Palestinians in Gaza who've been hijacked by Hamas, destroy Hamas. All of that is a precursor to the question that you asked. You first have to get rid of the poisonous regime, as you did in Germany, as you did in Japan,
Yeah.
in World War II. These were two.
There's no choice. There's no
Okay,
choice.
so that's a prerequisite.
Yes. There's no
But
choice.
but then look at what happened. I mean, what you had in Germany was denazification, and what you had in Japan under Douglas MacArthur was a cultural reformation.
Hmm.
And Japan that you visit today is so different from Japan of the 1930s.
Yeah.
Germany that you visit today is so different from Germany of the 1930s. Well, is that possible in the Arab world? And I categorically say, of course it is, because we've seen it already in two places. We've seen it in the Gulf states, and we see that when you visit Dubai or when you visit Abu Dhabi, or when you visit Bahrain, you see something entirely different.
Sure.
There was, in fact, a cultural change there. And let me say that same thing is, in my opinion, happening uh, to a considerable extent in Saudi Arabia. The de radicalization of these Muslim countries, these Arab countries, is some of it already took place, some of it is taking place.
Yeah.
But there's another country with a substantial Arab minority where that is already taken place, and that's called Israel.
Yeah.
20% of our citizens are Arabs, most of them Muslim.
Right.
They serve on, in high places in the academy, in the Supreme Court, in the Knesset, and so on. And I'm not saying that there isn't some radicalism there, but mostly there isn't.
Right.
And in fact, they're integrated into the society. So we have to do the same thing. We have to demilitarize Gaza after the destruction of Hamas, and we have to de-radicalize Gaza, and that will take some time, especially work on the mosques and on the schools. That's where children are, imbibe their values.
Yeah.
And then we have to also rebuild Gaza, and I hope to have our Arab friends help in that context.
Yeah, and I'd like to help as well. So I think it's important to pair firmness in taking out the terrorists, those who wish or intent on murder, and then at the same time to then help those who remain, which is also what happened in Germany and Japan.
Exactly right.
It's interesting because this is quite a rare thing in history. Usually, the victor pillages the loser, and if you look at it after World War One, the Treaty of Versailles was a big mistake, and it created immense bitterness in Germany, and it's part of what led to World War Two. And then World War II, that people realized, listen, we actually need to rebuild the economies, and instead of punishing them. And so, you had the rebuilding of Japan, rebuilding of Germany and much of Europe, and then we've had peace and prosperity for a long time.
I think that this is possible, but it has that small prerequisite. I'm saying small, and I don't really mean small. It's a big job of getting rid of Hamas, which we will. And remember that what Israel suffered on this ignominious day of October 7th was proportionately like 29 11s. So, when people tell us, make a ceasefire.
Sure.
And Hamas says, well, if we're still around, we're going to do it again and again and again. That's a direct quote.
Yes.
Okay, so would you make?
You don't need to read between the lines. No, you can just read the lines.
They're quite explicit about it.
Yes.
So obviously we can't do that any more than America would make a ceasefire with Al Qaeda after 9/11.
Yeah.
And this is 29/11. So they have to go, and they will go. I'm talking about combatants. I'm talking about terrorists.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about terrorist chieftains. But then I think we can build a different future with the Palestinians. And the thing that I have to also really respond to is these demonstrations against Israel, which is the only force that is taking measures to prevent civilian casualties. We're trying to do everything that we can, including entering into Gaza humanitarian help. But we have mass demonstrations. Where were these demonstrations when over 1 million Arabs and Muslims were killed in Syria, in Yemen, many of them starving to death, those who didn't die in explosions and in battle? Where were the demonstrations in London, in Paris, in San Francisco, in Washington? Where are they? No, I think the answer is they don't care about the Palestinians.
Right.
They hate Israel, and they hate Israel because they hate America, and they say so. They say from the river, free Palestine from the river to the sea.
Right.
You know what the river to the sea means?
Yes.
The river is not a river, it's a creek. It's called the Jordan River. Okay? The sea is the Mediterranean. Yes. In between is Israel.
Right.
All of 50 miles wide. When they say free Palestine from the river to the sea, they say destroy Israel.
Yeah.
So they're demonstrating for the destruction of Israel on behalf of people who committed the worst savagery perpetrated on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. That is a moral collapse. And it's understandable that people will have concern for civilian casualties because we do as well. That I understand. It's inconceivable and incomprehensible that people will actually protest on behalf of these murderers, these deliberate killers of babies, and not, they're not accidentally killing these people. We went into these cottages today. We saw where these killers came in and shot cribs.
Yes.
Shot families, murdered.
Bullet casings in the crib.
Bullet casings in the crib, exactly. It's just shocking.
Yes.
And so one has to understand, in every legitimate war, what you said before, the accidental civilian casualties that accompany any legitimate military action. That's often happened. happen to the
It's
Allies,
unavoidable.
it's unavoidable, unfortunately. You try to minimize them. But what these terrorists, Hamas terrorists, did is deliberately cross the line. They were out there to massacre, murder civilians en masse. And let me tell you, Schultz, the Chancellor of Germany, called them when he visited Israel. He called them the new Nazis. He called Hamas the new Nazis. I'll tell you what the difference between the original Nazis and the new Nazis is: capability. If they had the capability,
Oh yes.
if they weren't thrown back by brave soldiers who flooded the lines and brave civilians who fought with their fingernails, they would have killed every last one of us.
Yeah, I agree.
So what do you do to correct these lies and these distortions? Well, one, tell the truth, have the conversation we're having today. But
Yeah.
I think there's also a built-in weakness in Western higher education. It's not new. In 1933, shortly a few days after the rise of Hitler, the Oxford Student Union uh, had a debate, and the debate was, should that generation fight for king and country? And they resolved 2-1, under no circumstances to fight for king and country. Well, they soon learned differently. They couldn't, if they tolerated this kind of aggression that Germany was perpetrating and the barbarism, it soon spread to Britain, it soon spread to the entire world. If we tolerate this kind of barbarism that Hamas perpetrated on Israel, by the way, on Jews and Arabs alike in Israel, Arab citizens, Bedouins, uh, they spoke to me, these Bedouin fighters, Arab fighters in the Israeli Defense Force. One of them said, I woke up on that day, rushed to the line, and the first thing I saw, he said, the first thing I saw was a corpse of a woman, a headless corpse of a woman. And he said to me, then I knew exactly what we were fighting. We is Arabs and Jews in Israel fighting these monsters. So I think that once we recognize that, we have to unite all the forces of civilization against this new barbarism, this savage medievalism that is trying to stop a better future for all of us. And we can achieve this future. I think if we beat Hamas, we can go back to peace with Saudi Arabia. I think we can expand the circle of peace beyond anything imaginable. We can rebuild Gaza. We can build development projects
Yeah.
that will defy the imagination of the world. But first, we have to win. It's like against the Nazis. It's like against Al Qaeda. It's like against ISIS. First, you have to win.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Those who are intent on murder must be neutralized. Then the propaganda must stop. That is training people to be murderers in the future, and then making Gaza prosperous. And if that happens, I think it will be a good future.
Well, I hope you'll be involved in it. And,
I'd love to help.
and the fact that you came here, I think, speaks volumes of your commitment to try to secure a better future. I wish we had more time. The last time we spoke about AI.
Yeah.
And I think even here in this short visit, you had a glimpse of the great talents that are available here.
There's tremendous talent in Israel.
But it's talent that serves the world. It's all these things. You look at your iPhone. A good part of it was made here. You use Waze, was made here.
Sure.
You eat a cherry tomato, was made here. That's the positive part of the future that we have begun to build, and we'll resume building after this, after we defeat Hamas. Because and the last thing I say is I've never seen the people of Israel, Elon, so united. We have an opportunity to quarrel among ourselves. Our politics are famous for it, and yet here everyone united. Everyone united. I formed a unity government, an emergency unity government, and the people and it's not merely the soldiers, it's the families, even families of soldiers who are on the front line, and they say, finish the job so we can have a better future.
Yeah. Well, I hope for a better future for here and for the world.
Thank you. And thank you for coming here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.